Mrs. Maxine Edmondson Flournoy was a member of the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, the WASP, during World War II. After obtaining her pilot's license in 1941, she worked in a defense plant making dies for bullet shell casings. When a WASP recruiter contacted her in 1943, she eagerly accepted, completing primary, basic, and advanced flying training at Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas, as a member of WASP Class 43W8. Flournoy joined an elite group of women serving their country, while many male pilots were stationed overseas in the European and Pacific theaters. Formed in August 1943, the WASP accepted only 1,830 out of over 25,000 applicants, and only 1,074 women graduated from flight training. The WASP flew over 60 million miles in a variety of roles and missions, including aircraft ferrying, flight testing, target towing, and teaching basic navigation. Flournoy primarily flew the C-45, also known as the AT-7, at Hondo Army Airfield in Texas, instructing aviation cadets on navigation techniques. She flew cross-country whenever possible in order to increase her flight time, experience, and proficiency. She also ferried aircraft to and from factories and flight-tested aircraft with newly installed engines. During the war, 38 WASP gave their lives, 11 in training accidents, and 27 in the line of duty. WASP pilots operated in a civil service capacity without military benefits, and in December 1944, the WASP were disbanded, beginning a long road toward recognition for their efforts. After World War II, Flournoy continued to fly as a company pilot in Alice, Texas, and later while a Texas Historical Commissioner. In 1947, Maxine married petroleum engineer Lucien Flournoy. She remained active in the WASP Association, attending reunions and serving as the president of the association for 2 years. In 1977, the WASP gained congressional recognition as military pilots and finally received military benefits. President Carter appointed her to the USO World Board, where she served for 9 years. Maxine was among the 300 surviving WASP who were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, the nation's highest civilian award, in May 2010. The commemorative Air Force honored her by renaming one of its squadrons the Maxine Flournoy 3rd Coast Squadron in 2004 and dedicating a museum exhibit to her wartime exploits. Maxine remained married to her husband for 56 years until his death in 2003. She has 3 daughters and 11 grandchildren.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Miss Maxine Edmondson Flournoy, interviewed by Major Jason Monaco.
I made it.
Maxine, good morning. You're here.
Hi. Good morning. I'm glad to be here.
Now, I understand you're from Texas.
I'm from Alice, Texas, and Corpus Christi, Texas.
Okay. Well, ma'am, on behalf of the GOE team and all the students, we'd like to present you some yellow roses from Texas as our way of saying thank you for coming out this morning.
Oh, thank you very much. Beautiful.
I'll take them back and then give them back to you later if you'd like. So.
Oh, you're going to take them?
Yeah, or you can hold them the whole time if you'd like.
Oh, you can take them
Okay.
if you want to.
I'll give them back to you, I promise. So Maxine, I understand you flew in on Monday on American Airlines,
That's right.
and you had a pretty interesting flight.
Yes, we had a very interesting flight. I wanted to go up in the cockpit and help them fly, but they wouldn't let me.
But you're pretty sure that you could still fly that airplane,
Oh,
right?
sure. I could have flown that airplane just as well as they did. They didn't know it.
So if you don't mind, what I'm going to do for about 30, 45 minutes is ask you just a few questions and just
Okay.
chat about your life and your time in
I
the
will
WASP.
try to answer them.
Okay. And like we said, you can ask me some questions too.
Oh, okay.
Maxine, what was it like as a child in Joplin, Missouri, growing up during the Great Depression?
Well, it's hard for me to realize everybody was in that depression, and I don't think that I was any different from anybody else. We were all having a hard time. I didn't know it was a hard time then. Everybody was doing it. So.
And then after that, you attended Joplin Junior College in Missouri.
Yes, I did.
And when did you become interested in flying and learn about the opportunity to fly?
Well, this little Joplin Junior College had a government program where you could get your private pilot's license. And I had a girlfriend who was taking the class, and it sounded so interesting. She said she did spins and stalls and cross country. I decided I wanted to do that too, so I applied and I got in. That's how I started.
And you told us earlier that only 10% of the class was allowed to be women?
That's right, just 10%. And this little junior college was small, so there were just 9 men and me.
So at the end of the program, you get your pilot's license.
Yes.
And what then? Did you go directly to WASP training, or how did you hear about the WASPs?
No, I didn't go into it immediately. Evidently, they had my address from this other program, and so when they started the WASP program, they sent me a letter and told me all about it, and I asked if I wanted to join, and so I volunteered for the WASP program.
And before you got to Sweetwater in Texas, you went to Kansas City, and you had an Army physical.
Oh, yes.
How did that go?
Well, they told me to go to the nearest government facility for a physical, and so I went to Neosho, Missouri, which was about 40 miles from Joplin. And I created quite a stir because they didn't know what to do with me. But they eventually gave me a physical anyway, with the help of some nurses. So
you have your license, you have a physical. How did you end up in Sweetwater, Texas for WASP training?
well, they sent a letter and telling all about the WASP, and wanted to know if I wanted to volunteer, and I did. So I just volunteered and went to Sweetwater. I had no idea where Sweetwater, Texas was. And I'm glad I did.
We're glad you did too. Thank you so much for doing that. The training that you got to get your license in the civilian pilot training program, how well did that prepare you for what you later did at Sweetwater in the WASP training?
Well, it was a very good program, and it really did prepare me. I had to do almost everything over again, but it was familiar by then. So it wasn't hard at all.
You aced it, right?
Yeah.
So now you're at Sweetwater, and you start a 6-month program for WASP training. What was that like? What was a typical day for you at Sweetwater going through class 43-8?
Well, all I can remember is I think we had to get up by 6:30 in the morning, and we marched everywhere. We marched to the mess hall, we marched to the flight line, we didn't just walk anywhere, we marched everywhere. And whether we wanted to or not.
Was that a shock coming from civilian life? Were you ready for that?
Well, I thought it was very interesting. I didn't resent anything, and I just accepted it, and basically enjoyed life.
What did your family and friends back home in Missouri, what did they think that when you told them, or they heard that you were going to Texas to be a WASP?
You know, I don't remember what they thought. I don't guess I cared.
That's awesome. Maxine, what types of airplanes did you fly during the basic training there?
The usual primary, basic, and advanced. That's what they had us flying, and then I was sent to a navigation school, which I stayed. It was at Hondo, Texas, and I stayed there until they disbanded us. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
At Sweetwater, which airplanes did you fly during the 3 different phases of that 6-month program?
Well, you're asking me to name specific airplanes.
If you know them.
And I don't know that I can do that right now with all these people out here.
Well,
you intimidate me a little bit.
Okay, on Tuesday, when none of these people were here, we talked about the T6.
The T6?
The T6. And you said that was one of your favorite planes.
Yeah, AT6.
Yes, ma'am, AT6.
Yes, it still is a very favorite airplane of mine. I wish I could fly it again. And I could do it too.
What was so fun about flying that plane? What did you like about it?
Well, for one thing, it was the first airplane I flew that had retractable gear. And that was a real big deal then, if you could retract your gear. I guess it still is, I don't know.
And you said you liked all the horsepower that the engine had, those big radial engines that the T6 had?
That I what?
You liked all the horsepower that the engine had?
Yes. When you push the throttle forward, you could just feel yourself being pushed, too. It was a very exciting feeling when you can feel all that power.
So you're at Sweetwater, flying the T6, doing the training, marching everywhere. Did you have any free time? Any time to be social? Any weekends off?
We had very little time. We could, on the weekends, we could, if you could find somebody with a car. That in those days, cars were rationed, or anyway, there weren't very many cars around to go anywhere in. We had to go by bus if we wanted to go somewhere. Now, what was that you asked me? Was that it? Did I answer it?
Did you have any fun, or was it all work?
Oh, sure, I always had fun.
That's good.
Sure, you can make fun out of the worst kind of work if you want to. It's all a matter of just deciding you're going to have a good time.
What did you guys wear when you were flying? Did you have flight suits or the zoot suits, or was it a more formal uniform?
Well, we didn't get our uniforms until quite late. So originally we had, I think they call them pinks, so pinks and some kind of shirt. I can't remember what. And that was all we had. But that was fine. When we got our blue uniforms, we thought we were really dressed up. This is one of them. Although this isn't original, I had to get a little bit bigger one.
How much older or younger and how much experience did the other ladies with you at Sweetwater have in your class, flying wise?
You mean how much older were they? There were some in the 30s, not very many. And what else did you say?
How about prior flight experience or prior flight time?
Well, some had quite a bit of time, but most of them didn't have too much. I think I might have had 50 hours. I went through this government program, and then after that, every time I got $5 or $10, I'd go out and fly a few minutes. $5 didn't go very far.
What was the graduation like when you got done at Sweetwater? What was that event like?
Well, the actual graduation, we marched and sat down and had a lecture, if I can remember right. I think that was it.
Sounds like fun. Did you and the other ladies at Sweetwater have any idea how important what you were doing at the time was?
No, we didn't. We had no idea. We just knew that we were trying to help the war effort, and I didn't know that we were going to be famous ever. So we just did what we were told to the best of our ability. Every WASP that I knew was very patriotic. We were concerned about the country and where we were going and what we were doing. I guess we still are. So.
After graduation, how did you end up at Hondo? Was that a choice, or did you get orders to go there?
Well, I didn't. I must have had some orders because I don't think I knew where Hondo was at the time. So somebody had to tell me where to go.
It's still like that. Had you ever been to Texas, or you went to Texas at Sweetwater?
No, I hadn't been. That was my first trip to Texas. I've had a hard time getting out of Texas, too. Still there.
How many of you went from training in Sweetwater to Hondo for your operational WASP tour?
Well, now, there weren't very many at Hondo. There were just 5 or 6 or 7. And they had 3 flights there, and so we were assigned to one of those flights. So there were just 2 or 3 of us in a flight. And well, that's just the way we were. Whatever your flight did, well, you did it too.
And what were your flying duties at Hondo?
Well, at Hondo, we were assigned to the sub-depot, and we did slow times on new engines. Now, at a slow time, you used to have to drive a car slow about 1,000 miles to break it in. Well, they broke in airplane engines the same way. We flew them slowly for, I don't remember how many hours, but probably 100 or so. And that's the way we flew. We did a lot of that kind of flying. It was kind of boring. I think that's why they gave it a job.
You also talked about training cadet navigators on their graduation flights that had to be 1,000 miles. What was that like?
Now at my field, the commanding officer thought that flying first pilot for the cadets was combat training. And so at my field, we had to go as co-pilot. But I understand that some of the other fields that the WASP were, they flew all the way. I lost my train of thought.
I'll help you out. So you told me that you would take off on Friday morning and the cadets would navigate by the sun.
That's right.
And then come back Sunday night and navigate by the stars.
That's right.
And you would fly the headings and altitudes that they told you to.
That's right.
How far would you let them go before you got close to getting lost? Were there any stories where they would get you off course?
Well, I'm sure that they were off course a lot of times, but I only had to take over one time.
Okay.
And I guess the instructor, I can't remember whether he was on the airplane or not, but they had us flying right into a mountain, and I had to take over that time. That's the only time.
Glad you did.
Yeah.
And this is in the AT-7.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, could that AT-7 make the entire trip from Hondo to Los Angeles?
No, AT-7 had to land one time. We usually landed in the vicinity of El Paso or some nearby facility.
So you land, you hop out of the plane. Did you have any
What was that?
Did you have any strange reactions when a female pilot hops out of a plane, say in El Paso or anywhere else you landed?
I don't think I understood still.
On one of these flights, let's say you land in El Paso, and you get out to get gas, to get food, and a female pilot hops out of the cockpit. Did you ever have any strange reactions from people at the airport on the tarmac when they saw that?
Oh yeah, mostly they were surprised, and so they would come up and ask us questions, but mostly it was okay with them. I mean, it had to be, I guess.
Now, those planes weren't originally designed with you in mind.
No.
So you were flying once, and the male cadet, you said he got up and used the restroom 3 times?
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I started getting ready for those flights on Thursday without taking anything to drink afterwards. It's a wonder I didn't make myself sick, but I evidently didn't. And so one time I was flying, and the pilot got up 3 different times and went to the back. And when he came back the last time, he looked over at me and he said, "Are you human?" Anyway. I'm ahead of him.
You have been all week. You have been all week. Maxine, you said at Sweetwater you had 2 different commanding officers, an older major and a younger captain or lieutenant later. How were they different, and how were their attitudes towards what you were doing different?
Well, the older one thought we ought to be home in the kitchen, and the younger one thought we could do no harm. So it was, the older one was very respectful. That's just the way he felt. He was honest about it. He just didn't think we needed to be in the air. And so that's just the way it was.
Did you encounter any other negative attitudes towards what you were doing at the time, or any other biases in places you traveled?
No, as far as I can remember, we were accepted as we were, and if we were not, we didn't know about it.
Now, I noticed that you have your uniform on today. Can you talk to us more about what a big deal it was?
What was that?
Can you tell us more about what a big deal it was when the WASPs got their uniforms, these nice designer Santiago blue uniforms, what that was like during the war?
I can't remember.
We saw a picture in the video of you with a handbag that comes down to your waist.
Oh, yes.
Was that a pretty big deal at the time?
Oh, yes. That was the first shoulder bag that I had ever seen, and I think it was maybe the first shoulder bag, and it made shoulder bags popular.
And what is special about the WASP wings that you're wearing today?
Well, I guess it's this, what do you call that? It's not a triangle. What is it?
The diamond?
Diamond, yeah. I guess the diamond is the key to that.
What was your scariest moment in an airplane, either at Sweetwater or in Hondo? And did you have any close calls that kept you up at night?
I really had no close calls. I almost ran out of fuel one time, but that was the only close call I ever had. I didn't quite run out.
That's good. So as we saw in the video, you guys served as WASPs in a civilian capacity.
Yes.
With no military benefits. But General Arnold and Jacqueline Cochran were among the Air Force Army Air Corps leaders and future Air Force leaders at the time who were really pushing to militarize the WASP. And you guys thought that eventually you would become officers. Can you tell us a little bit more about the officer training that you went to in Florida and what that was like?
Well, they sent us to military facility in Orlando, Florida, and we took this officer training course. But we weren't made officers until about 1970, years later. So anyway, that was okay with us. Maybe.
Now, you told us that on the way to Florida, you took your first commercial flight. What was that like?
Oh, yes. I was sitting next to a friend, and it was early in the morning, and so they were serving breakfast, and my friend got it was a wonderful breakfast, bacon and eggs and everything, and they came by to see what I wanted, and I said, no, I didn't want anything. So my friend ate her great breakfast, and she said, Maxine, don't you want something? And I said, no, I'm not hungry. Well, I found out later that the meal came with a ticket, and I didn't know that. I'm ahead of him still.
All week. In 1944, there was a big push to militarize the WASPs, but it didn't work, and you guys were deactivated, disbanded. How did you guys feel when you heard the news that you couldn't do this anymore?
Well, I was disappointed, but I didn't know why we weren't militarized. I'm still not quite sure, but anyway, that's just the way it was. You had to accept it.
Did you guys get the news in Hondo fairly quickly, or were you pretty isolated at Hondo Airfield?
Did we get the news of that? I think we got the news right when it happened. They weren't holding anything back, I don't think.
And you told me earlier that you were very proud to support the war effort, and it was probably more a case of civilian pilots who wanted to continue flying in the States and wanted their jobs. What was that like?
Now, if I'm understanding you right, you're saying that the military pilots wanted to fly when they were out of the military? Is that what you said?
More that it was the civilian pilots who may have been concerned about the WASPs threatening their jobs and their livelihood.
Oh, the military accepted us. It was the civilian pilots that opposed our being. They just didn't think we ought to be there. It's the civilians.
So at the end of the war, towards the end of the war, the Army Air Corps offered all WASPs the opportunity to come back as military officers.
Yes, they did.
And what did you think about that?
Well, we weren't going to fly, so I just decided I didn't want it. I might have been better off if I'd have stayed in, but I didn't.
Did you stay in touch with friends of yours who stayed in and actually became military officers?
I can't remember if I did or not. I stayed in touch with some of them, but just as a friend, usually. Yeah, is that what you wanted to know?
Yes, ma'am. So as the war is winding down, you're no longer flying as a WASP, but you have all these ratings, you have all this experience, you have all this time. What did you decide to do with that? And
I found a job with a civilian company, and my boss had a company that sold pipe, and so he needed to fly where they were having a sale of pipe, and I flew mostly over Texas, a few times in Oklahoma and a few times in Louisiana, but that was mostly where we flew, but we flew quite a bit because he wanted to buy the pipe and ship it to Corpus Christi.
can you tell us how you met your husband?
Well, my husband was working for a company who was hiring the company that I was working for. And so my boss asked him, he said, "Do you want to meet my pilot?" And Lucian thought that his pilot was a man. And so I said, he said, yes, he'd like to meet us. Anyway, that's how he introduced us at that time.
So he was pretty surprised to meet